What's up guys, my name's Brian, the owner of Engine Customs and Performance. Today we're going to be installing a 6-quart Prometeo oil pan onto a Fiat 500 Abarth. Now this 6-quart oil pan works on not only the Fiat 500 Abarth, but also the 500T, 500L, 500X 1.4 turbo, and the Dodge Dart. If you're interested in purchasing one of these for your vehicle, you can do so directly on our website at ngencustomsandperformance.com. Let's get started. So let's go over the tools you're going to need to get the job done. Check it out. You need a Phillips head screwdriver, a small pry bar, or you can also use a flathead screwdriver, a 3/8 inch socket wrench, a couple extensions, and a swivel socket. We have an 8mm socket for the lower frame brace that is on this particular vehicle. But if you have a factory frame brace, you're going to need a 19mm socket. You're also going to need a T27 Torx Bit socket. That's to remove most of the bolts on the bumper. You need a 10, 12, and 15mm socket, a small 10mm wrench, 27mm socket, funnel, 13mm wrench, a hammer, a gasket scraper, and to help speed things along, an electric impact. So the first question you may ask is, why do I need this upgrade? Well, for starters, the factory oil pan holds 4 quarts of oil, which in most cases is just fine. The Prometeo oil pan adds an extra 2 quarts to the vehicle. When your vehicle is highly modified, that oil is going to get really hot. And really hot oil can burn. It can also compromise how well the engine and the turbo operates. By adding in those extra 2 quarts, it's going to help keep those temperatures down. So let me show you what all comes with the Prometeo kit. Check it out. So of course you're going to have the Prometeo oil pan itself. It comes in a few colors. Red is the most popular. It also comes in silver, blue, and yellow. You're also going to get 4 extension bolts. Now these are longer bolts to work with the oil pan itself, which I'll show you later on in the video. You also get a new oil cap, which states that this vehicle holds that additional oil. Now what you don't get in the kit, but I have here now, is some Permatex Ultra Black silicone. Now you can pick this up at any hardware store or auto parts store, but you want to make sure you have at least one of these tubes to when we put the new oil pan on. So to get started, you need to remove the front bumper and wheels from the vehicle. Now to save time, we've already done that on this 500 Abarth. If you need instructions on how to remove the wheels and the front bumper, check out our video on the Cypher towing straps where it gives detailed instructions on how to perform that procedure. Now that the front bumper and the wheels are completely off, we need to go ahead and drain the oil. So just make sure you take the cap off so all the oil comes out when we drain it below. All right, now underneath the vehicle, we need to first remove the factory skid plate. Take your 10mm socket to remove it. And then just set it aside. You will not be reinstalling this with the new oil pan. All right, now we need to remove the lower frame brace. Now this one has an aftermarket brace on it, so it's a lot thicker. So it's got different bolts. It takes an 8mm Allen socket. If you have the factory lower frame brace, it takes a 19mm socket to remove. These are usually in there pretty snug, so just to keep from stripping any threads, I just use a socket wrench to get them out instead of an electric impact. And set it aside. Now it's time to drain the oil. Drain plug takes a 13mm wrench. Make sure you get your drain pan. All right, once you have all of the oil drained from the oil pan, go ahead and put the drain plug back in. That way you don't have any oil, little excess oil drip onto the ground. So the next step normally is you have to drop the exhaust mid pipe. But as you can see on this car, it's missing because their exhaust goes out the side of the bumper to the left. So, but just to remove the exhaust mid pipe normally is you have two nuts here which take a 13 millimeter. So you have to remove those. And then it hangs here where you have an exhaust hanger. So you have to remove the exhaust hanger, and then that exhaust mid pipe will drop down, giving you access to the oil pan. All right, now we need to start removing the bolts that secure the oil pan. Now, as you can see, there are a total of 14 bolts. There's 7 here and 7 on the other side. And then you have 2 nuts on the passenger side of the oil pan that you also have to remove. They all take a 10 millimeter socket. So I'm going to start by breaking them loose, and then I'm going to come back and remove them with an electric impact. They're all pretty easy to break loose. All right, last one to break loose. Now we're going to switch. And get them out. Now you don't want to lose these bolts because you're going to reuse all of them but 4. Don't worry, once all these come out, the pan's not going to drop on you because it's still secured with silicone. All right. So the next part is we went ahead and removed this plastic cover. It goes right behind this brace bar. It's secured with 3 screws. There is one here behind this brake line, one here, and then one attaches here. You just use a Phillips head to remove it. The reason why we remove it is I can give you a better shot of these last 2 nuts that have to be removed, and then you actually have to remove the studs so that the oil pan will come off when we're ready to pry it off. And again, this will give you a clear shot, and it is a pry point for us to take the pan off. All right, so take your 10 millimeter. Now I'm going to start with taking this nut off. And I'm actually going to put this nut onto the other stud, because that's how I'm going to remove these studs. Because otherwise this pan, it won't come off without doing this step. Let's use my fingers. All right. Now I'm going to actually put this nut on this stud. All right. Now that you've got that nut on finger tight, we want to tighten this nut onto this other one. All right, now I'm going to take a wrench to put on this nut here so I can unscrew the stud. Okay, to remove this stud, you have to make sure that this bottom nut is super tight against this top nut. Because by doing that, it's going to force, when you loosen this top nut, it's going to force the stud to spin as opposed to the nut itself. So let's see if I've got it. I take a small 10mm wrench to do this. All right. And it just takes a little bit of time, but you just want to watch it to make sure the stud is spinning and not just the nut. All right, now we have these two bolts here. Takes a 15mm socket. Gotta go ahead and remove those. Once you break them loose, you can pretty much take them out with your fingers. All right, there we go. All right, we have 3 more bolts, and then that's all the bolts that secure the oil pan. We have 1 bolt here, 1 here, and then 1 up here. It's basically the flywheel cover. Takes a 10mm socket to remove. All right, last one. All right, so now we got to pry the oil pan off. I've already started it. I just take a flathead. You can take a pry bar if you want to, just to get it in the spot where you see some old silicone. And then you just take your hammer and start hammering in there. And then you can start prying the oil pan off. Just kind of work your way around and you'll get the oil pan off. All right. And it's off. All right, so now we need to do some work on the workbench. So I've got the factory oil pan as well as the Prometeo oil pan. What we need to do is we need to transfer the flywheel cover from the OEM pan to that Prometeo. It's very easy. It just has 1 10mm bolt. So just take that off. All right, now we can actually set this factory oil pan aside. And we are going to put this cover onto the pan. There we go. So get it finger tight first. And then what you're going to want to do is you want to make sure that these holes line up perfectly. And that will also make sure that this flywheel is straight. All right, we're going to tighten it down. All right, there we go. All right, now we need to go ahead and put the Permatex Ultra Black Silicone on the oil pan. Now you don't need a lot, you just need enough to cover all the way around. So just start at one end and just work your way all the way around with a bead. And you want to try to be as neat as possible, even though once this is installed, you are the only one that's going to see it. All right, getting this last bit. Okay, so you do have a limited amount of time once you've put all this silicone onto the pan to secure it back to the engine before it's dry too much. Typically, you have about an hour, so that's plenty of time to put the pan back on. But first, we need to go ahead and get that excess silicone off the engine. Okay, as you can see, when we took the oil pan off, all the silicone pretty much stayed on the engine. So what we need to do is you need to take a scraper to get this silicone off. And it should be pretty easy to take off. These scrapers you can get at any auto parts store, but as long as you get most of this off, you're in pretty good shape. And you can peel some of it off too. If you don't get all of it off, it's okay, but you just want to get majority. All right, now let's put the oil pan on. There we go. It's a pretty snug fit, so you got to line everything up just right. You just kind of have to look at it, look for the holes. And then what I do is I take these longer bolts that go in right here, and get those in first. Just to get it started, so then you're not having to hold the oil pan up with your hands. Okay, there we go. Then you can kind of still adjust the oil pan where you need it, so you can put in the rest of the screws or the bolts. And these all go in with a 10mm socket. So once you get all the bolts in on the oil pan, something I want to point out, you can see on the end, this is where the studs were. I don't reinstall those studs. I just put two of the extra bolts that you have from the original oil pan and use those. It's just a lot easier. So if you ever have to take the oil pan off in the future, once you take these bolts off, it's just way easier to take this oil pan off. So once you put all the bolts in, just go around one more time and just make sure all of those bolts are snug. All right, now we got to put these bolts back in. Just screw them in by hand first, just to get them started. So if these bolts go in real easy, well, that's just another reassurance that you've got the oil pan lined up correctly. And you just take a 15mm socket and tighten them down. All right, the last thing we need to do is put the bolts back in where the flywheel cover is. Now, I want to point something out with this flywheel cover. Now, once you put these bolts in, we put oil in it, and you start the vehicle. If it makes a really loud rattling sound right away, don't be alarmed, but it's because this flywheel cover is bent, and it's actually touching the flywheel. So if that happens, you're going to have to take the oil pan back off to fix it. But if you took the flywheel cover and you didn't bend it at all, then you should be just fine. So just take the bolts, put those back in. Just do them hand tight first, and then we'll tighten them up with a 10mm socket. All right, now you want to go ahead and reinstall that plastic shield. Remember, it's secured with 3 screws. Just use a Phillips head once you work it back in there. All right, now we have the oil pan 100% installed. At this point, you want to reinstall the exhaust mid-pipe. Since this car doesn't have one, we get to skip that step. In terms of the silicone, you want to have that cure for about 24 hours, especially when it's cold outside. During the heat of the summer, you may not have to wait that long, but for good measure, I always recommend 24 hours. Once that's done, then you want to go ahead and put oil in the car. Just make sure you put 6 quarts instead of the standard 4. All right, now that we've got the 6 quarts of oil into the engine, it's a good idea to go ahead and install a new oil filter. Now, if you're not sure how to replace the oil filter, check out our oil change on a Fiat 500 Abarth video for detailed instructions. So let's put that oil filter in. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and reinstall that lower frame brace. Once that's installed, then all we have left to do is to install a skid plate. The factory skid plate will not work with the Prometeo oil pan. Your only 2 options are the Euro compulsion skid plate, which is what we're going to be putting on the vehicle, or you can also install the Prometeo skid plate, which is available to purchase on our website as well. So let's put this back on. All right, now go ahead and put the front bumper back on and then put the wheels on, and you're good to go. So this concludes the video on how to install a 6-quart Prometeo oil pan onto a Fiat 500 Abarth. If you're interested in purchasing an oil pan for your vehicle, you can do so directly on our website at ngencustomsandperformance.com. If you like the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss any future install videos or awesome Abarth content. And until next time, I'm out.